Can everybody hear me? Everyone in the back, okay. I'm fairly loud, actually, and I drank a lot of coffee this morning, so you are in for a treat. So I'm Maggie Farnsworth. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions at Wellesley. This is the end of my 10th year. To add to my expertise, I am also the parent. I am a parent, and I just went through the private school admissions process for a preschooler in Boston, which, let me tell you, how cutthroat that is. So I share your angst that goes on. I was actually put on a wait list. I was like, what is going on? He's 4. So I certainly, you know, it was funny to see it from the other side, and had to get talked down a few times by my own director and said, he's going to be okay. She's like, take your own advice. I was like, right, take my own advice. So I just want to say we should all give a round of applause to the Joyce Ivy folks. They have done so much work. As you can imagine, it's a bit of a fiasco to pull an event like this together, and I know I can speak for my colleagues on the admissions side. We are so delighted to be a part of this organization because they do amazing things. Now, I'm going to put out my own bias right now. So I work for Wellesley College. Has anybody heard of Wellesley? All right, good. Sometimes people are like, where? What? I am very biased because I work for a women's college. So I'm delighted you are all girls in this room. And you know, our mission, certainly at a place like Wellesley, is to empower women to look bigger, to think and not just be, you know, I'm not just going to be an engineer. I'm going to be a leader in my field, because we know you are the next generation, and we are counting on you to become the next Hillary Clintons and, you know, take moving this country forward, because we do know women are still very underrepresented in so many different areas, and it's your job to grab these opportunities, because I'm going to be very honest, it is very, very rare you get these institutions in a room together to have these kinds of conversations that you're having today. So I'm going to reiterate a bunch of things that Mike's already covered. So, but like I said, I'm a parent of a 6- and 5-year-old, so repetition is key. So, you know, what I'm going to do is give you some general basic tips on the college process, and then what's great is all of the sessions later are going to cover these in more depth. So you're going to ask lots of questions. You're going to think about things in a way that you might not have before. But before we do that, like I said, what I loved about what Mike was saying earlier was that you're also sitting in a room and you're surrounded by peers that are just as smart as you and just as excited about learning. And for some of you, this may be the first time actually you're around this many smart women. So, and I know Mike said, you know, you're gonna take some risks today, and you're gonna step outside of your comfort zone. You know, even if you're shy, you're gonna break out of that. So we're gonna start with we're gonna do an icebreaker. Everybody loves icebreakers. Now I realize this room's we're a little crowded in here. So I'm gonna ask just the students to take part in this. So we're gonna do a little stretching. I also ran this morning, so we're gonna do some calisthenics right now, all right? All right, coffee. I know, you can see the coffee, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a statement, and if you agree with it, and there's, you know, don't be shy. You can accept who you are, because part of the college process, it's not just thinking about, you know, oh, look at this number 4 school on the list. This is an amazing thing. You're going to dig deep, and you're going to think about who you are as a person and what you want to be. Now, I have been out of college for a couple of years now, and I still don't know what I want to be, which my mom yells at me frequently about. But on the flip side, you know, there are lots of things that are very important to me. And I know, you know, I needed a college that was small, and I needed one that was I needed to be around people who are much smarter than me. So this is your time to start thinking about the things that are really, really important to you. And you might not have thought about some of these yet. So. Okay, so we're going to start by putting them out. If you agree, you're going to stand. And you stay standing unless you disagree, then you're going to sit. All right? And then you'll get to see others in the room sharing some of your passions. Sound good? Ready? All right. I never thought I would be applying to college outside of my home state. It's okay. Just stand. Don't be shy. Good for you guys. All right. I love math. Yeah, women in math. Woo! All right. I love running. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, like is okay. I drove more than 6 hours to get here. All right, give it up for that. I've referred to myself as a nerd at some point. Embrace your nerdiness. I'm the first in my family to go to college. All right, awesome. I'm from the Upper Peninsula. I just learned about this. I'm not from Michigan. Woo! Yes. Am I open? I'm actually from upstate New York, so, but it's kind of like Michigan. I play an instrument. Nice. Ooh, I'm curious to see if anyone stands for this one. I am a twin. Anyone a twin? Nice. Twin, yay! I am nervous about how I'm going to pay for college. Parents can all stand for that one if you want. I want to be a doctor. All right. And the last one, I can text without looking at my phone. All right, you can all sit now. So, see, now we got the blood flowing. And hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the talent. There's certainly some interesting talents here. And also that there are other students who share your passions, and that is what is great about the institutions that are represented here. I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had. If you get a chance to meet Allison Jekyll out there, when she tells her story about going to Penn and finally being in a place where students were just as engaged and excited about the learning process, that's our goal for you today, is to kind of think about these bigger ideas, get excited. Not that there aren't great institutions in Michigan, but there are so many great colleges that you might not even have heard of. So what I'm going to do, so on page 7 of the student launch plan, there's a quiz at the end of this, so you better take good notes. Good notes. Just kidding, I would never give you a quiz. So we're going to talk about a lot of things, and what's great about this booklet is that there's tons of information, space to take notes. My session's just the first 5. And what I'm going to do right now is talk a little bit about a couple of major themes when you're thinking about college. Because like I said, I get a little sad sometimes. I've seen students walk into my college, they're coming in for an information session, and families will have the US News World Report. And they'll just have a list, and they're just looking at, just the schools on this list, and I can't look outside any of it. And I think, gosh, those numbers don't actually give you any data about fit. And I know Caroline had mentioned, and you're going to hear this a ton of times today, is finding the right fit. And like I said, this is a time for you to reflect on what is important to you. So I'm going to throw out a couple of themes, and I am very sad today because there's a colleague who normally joins me for this, and he has this great metaphor about college search being like finding the best t-shirt ever. And we all like shopping sometimes. But what's great is that you think about what's important to you in a college, and it's not just it's not just numbers. It's much deeper than that, because I'm a firm believer it doesn't matter where you go. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a Secretary of State. Fine. But the difference is the journey in between, and that can drastically shape the rest of your life. It'll shape who you become friends with. It could shape your passions. It could shape what you end up majoring in. There are so many different options that you need to think. And I get it. You're 17, maybe you're 16, And if you're like me when I was that age, I changed my mind every 5 seconds. But what's great is that there are some basic things. So one of the things that you want to think about, certainly is location. And I know some of you stood up earlier and said, I can't believe I even thought I would look outside of Michigan. But like I said, what's interesting about the selective admissions process, and I do love hearing that whole, why would anyone be interested in me? I'm just this, average kid. Well, you shouldn't call yourself average. You're very smart. You're this smart kid, but I'm like everybody else around here. I'm going to give you a little detail about my pool. So my most represented state on campus is California. After that, it's Massachusetts. And then we sit there and we think about how on earth are we going to get kids from the Midwest to apply? I mean, for the life of me, I cannot get students to, they're like, Wellesley, where? I've never even heard of this. We spend a lot of time in our office sitting there thinking about how can I get you to apply, which is funny because you're thinking you'd never want me. And it's not true because you think about it. I read tons and tons of kids from Massachusetts, and then I'm like, oh, here we go, another Massachusetts application. But then I see this super interesting kid from Minnesota. I'm like, so different. And then you think about it from the context, if you apply to University of Michigan, what do they get? Lots of kids from Michigan. Well, they actually get a lot from Minnesota too, actually. So in their pool, you're very similar to everybody else. But now in my pool, you're very, very different. So think about that, because now you become excited about you. And when you're thinking about location, it's an important thing, is who you are in somebody else's pool. So you think you're ordinary, but you're not when you're in somebody else's pool. Now, location's a big thing. I'm not going to lie. All the schools that are represented here are far away. And it can be a leap of faith to say, I'm going to get on an airplane, and I'm going to go, try something totally different. But like I said, you're going to think outside of the box today. So just out of curiosity, how many of you would actually consider going to a women's college? A women's college. That's good. That's more than I anticipated. Some people are like, now, if I told you, or let's say, how many of you was like dying to go to school in New Jersey? Yeah. Now, what if I told you it were free? Would you suddenly become interested? Oh, yeah. So we're going to talk about financial aid. But that's why I'm saying location, although very important, you've got to keep an open mind, because you never know what's going to be the right fit. And so, I mean, you also think about, not a lot of people raise their hands over New Jersey. It's actually a very lovely state. But if you haven't visited, you don't know. So never cross things off your list just because you think, I'm only going to do this. My location, I can't look out of anything outside of this box. Because realistically, that's why you came today, right? Look outside of the box. So the next thing you want to think about is, I like to think of this as the style. It's got to be the right kind of feel. And that's one of those things where it's really hard to get a sense of a campus without setting foot on it, right? So, you think about, am I going to like the other students? Because there are 3,600 colleges and universities across the United States. That's crazy. And not every single one is going to be a good fit for you. So you got to get a sense of the types of students. And each college and university attracts different types of students. And then you say, so I can't visit, my family can't afford it, or I can't take the time off. So how do I get a feel of that? So has anybody heard of the internet? Yeah, okay, good. What's great is that a lot of us have pumped a lot of time and money into our web presence. I actually, this year, we spend more money revamping our website than we do on print materials now. And a lot of that is designed because we know you can't visit campus. And we want to make sure that if you apply to Wellesley College and you are admitted, or if you apply to Dartmouth and you show up on campus, you know what kind of students that you're going to be surrounded by. Because the essence of a campus, frankly, is the faculty and the students. And these are the people that are going to surround you and push you and challenge you. And we may look the same on paper. You think, oh, what's the difference really between Stanford, Yale, Princeton, all of these schools? They look very similar, but each one of them is very different. So here's a couple of tips on websites to start digging around on, because you can start doing this now, because most of you are juniors, about to be seniors, right? Right. This is the ideal time to start doing your research. And you're going to keep a very detailed spreadsheet. You're just going to keep nodding your head. Yes. And you're going to start taking notes, because these are going to be important later when you go through the application process. You're going to go onto websites of schools that you're interested in, and most of us have videos. Videos of current students. You can do virtual tours online. Most of us have bloggers. You can write to these bloggers and ask them questions. What do you love about your school? What do you dislike about your school? Here, I'm going to give you also some questions to never ask admissions officers. Yes. Never ask any school how good their blank department is, all right? So never say, oh, how's the English department at Princeton? Because you know what the answer is for every single school? It's great. It's great. No one is going to say it's bad. We get paid to say it's good. So you're going to dig a little deeper, like I said, because at the base of what you're doing is you're trying to find the right fit. Now, I agree. One of the other pieces that you need to think about is, what do you want to major in? I'm also going to put this out there, and you can do this by a show of hands. How many of you actually really have no idea what you want to do? I bet you the truth is more of you actually don't know. You think you know, but you don't know, because some schools offer over 80 majors, and some of them you've never even heard of. So how do you even know you don't like it? You definitely need to pick a place that's going to, at least if you do have a major in mind, that offers it, but also be a little bit wary about places that are very, very specific. Because, and I'm saying this from the transfer process coordinator's viewpoint, this process is really stressful, right? There's a lot that goes into it. It gets worse if you have to transfer later, because suddenly you were so focused on one thing, and then all of a sudden you get there and you realize this was nothing that I thought it was going to be. So it's really important to, like I said, keep an open mind. So definitely look for schools that have maybe a range of majors, including the one that you're interested in, but also know, I read a really fascinating New York Times article a couple years ago that said by the time you all retire, you will have switched careers 8 times. Now, everybody looks at me like I'm crazy when I say this. I'm going to give you a little example. So I graduated from a small, highly selective liberal arts college, and I was a psych major. And so my dad said to me, what on earth are you going to do with that? And I said, whatever I want, Dad. And I did. So since my time graduating as a psychology major, right, I have done consulting, then I was a software developer, then I was an IT project manager, and now I'm in admissions. I got a couple more left. And what's nice is not once, including the software developer one, which is kind of interesting, not once did they ask me what I majored in. And I actually was told for the software developer one, we're only hiring you because of where you went to college. And it sort of blew me away, because one, I thought, gosh, I really need this job. And then two, what she said after it really sunk in about the value of the education that I had received. And what she said was, we only hire smart people who can think outside of the box. And she goes, institutions like yours, that's what they do. They don't train you for a very specific job. They train you to be a leader, and you can, take risks and step up and be okay no matter what situation I throw you in. Like, for example, now you're going to have to learn how to code. I was like, that sounds great. Because so much of what you can learn later is on the job, and I get it, it's tough. The economy, as parents are like, but you better make sure my kid gets a job. I get that it's a real thing, but you also have to remember that, it's going to be okay if you can come out of your education with these skill sets. Because you think about this, especially when you're set, for those who are absolutely dead set on a major. What did you major in 20 years ago to be an iPhone app developer? Yeah, nothing. And frankly, you think about some of these majors today, in 10 years, what you learned will be completely obsolete. But you know will not be obsolete when you attend one of these amazing institutions. Writing skills, I can't tell you how, I know it's horribly obvious, but I do a lot of the hiring in my office, and I can actually tell who went to what kind of institution based on their writing. Because it's very clear to me, it didn't matter if you were a math major or, you know, an astrophysics major, this person did a lot of writing. They can communicate, and these are skill sets that no specific major teaches, but being surrounded by super smart people who are willing to take risks. See, I'm being repetitive, right? That's the most important thing. So when you're thinking about, when you're looking for your colleges, like I said, keep an open mind when it comes to the majors. All right, and then, you know, I'm not gonna lie, you do have to think about what's gonna make you happy. Because I also don't think you should study the whole time, right? Nobody wants to be your roommate if all you're gonna do is hide in your room and study. You ought to make sure that these places that you're considering offer things that are gonna make you happy, right? So whether that's, you know, these are the kind of people that I like to hang out with, and, you know, we have similar interests. A lot of us have different clubs and sports and activities, lots of political organizations that you can look into. So make sure that when you're looking at places that they have at least a couple of things you want to do for fun, because fun is really important. All right, so I've talked a little bit about finding the right fit, keeping an open mind, and now let's talk a little bit about your next steps, because here, this is it. You're starting your process. You've done some research. There's some really amazing websites out there that give lists. You know, you can plug in like, here are the following 17 things I'm interested in, and out pops this list. You know, it never hurts to look at any one of them. But now, this is the time you start the list, right? And a lot of you will be working with your college counselors or your guidance counselors. You want to start big. Don't start narrow, because it's harder later. You want more choices in the beginning, and then you narrow your list down. And another way to think about, other than the internet and using those lists, you want to also talk to people around you. So all of you have favorite teachers, right? Ask your favorite teachers where they went to college. Ask, you know, somebody in the community you admire. Maybe there's this amazing friend of the family who's this lawyer, and you know, people love to talk about their own alma maters. And you want to get a range of places. So you never know who went where, so start asking, you know. Ask around here. There's so many different institutions represented, and there's lots of options out there, so just start digging around. So start your list big, and you want to try, if possible, and I know what's great about Michigan is that you guys do have a range of schools in state, right? Go visit a lot of these. Even though you think, gosh, you know, I'm all about big universities, this is the only kind of institution I want to go visit your local small liberal arts college, especially if you've never set foot on one of those campuses, because you never know if you're going to like it. And then you're going to have points of comparison, because if you really like it, awesome. If you don't, now you know for sure. You know, so go to the mid-sized university, look at a range, and if possible, you know, drive to the next state, because they also have some great options. I'm going to put this out there. Do a little digging with your counselor. There are a lot of schools actually that have funding, some, not a lot, that will actually fly you in the fall. A lot of them you'll have to apply for these things, but you know, you never know where, like I said, there's a lot of us out here who are just dying for someone from Michigan to come. So sure, if you apply to this, we'll fly you out in the fall. So a lot of schools actually, especially in the highly selective range, we'll look at folks like that. So, now the other piece of advice that I want to throw out there, because this is the research phase, right? This is the phase where you're going to be super organized and you're going to write everything down. Because what's going to burn you later is not being on top of deadlines. So and you think it's early right now, it gets overwhelming. If you apply to 15 colleges, it's sort of this weird gauntlet we make you run through. We all have different names for the admissions processes. You're going to hear a lot of terms today you might not have ever heard before. So whether it's early action, early decision, single choice early action, some are binding, some are not binding, regular decision, rolling admission. There's so many different plans and terms out there. You need to stay on top of those. And because all of us have very different requirements, this time, especially over the summer, is the best time to write them down. Because here's an example. A lot of the highly selectives require very specific testing. So whether it's the ACT, some require specific SAT-2 subject tests. Imagine you find your dream school, and I get this phone call every single year. Oh my goodness, I just stumbled across Wellesley and I totally fell in love with it. But I notice you require 2 SAT-2 subject tests. I've only taken the SAT. It's the day before the deadline. Do you know what my answer is? Sorry. You know, and it's tough because I hate thinking, gosh, you didn't have a chance to apply because, you know, yeah, can you still apply? Sure, but everybody else took the requirements, so it puts you at a huge disadvantage. I'm not going to lie. It is a very selective process out there. A lot of us have very low admit rates, and you want to put your best foot forward because that's what this whole admissions process is. You're finding yourself. The application is not just a set of SAT, ACT, transcript. You're not just numbers, and you're going to learn this in a very deep way today about holistic admissions and what that means. It's so much about telling your own story. So you want to make sure that you have all the pieces in place. So do your research, stay on top of deadlines, and I can't stress enough, especially for the parents, the deadlines are extremely crucial for financial aid. So you don't want to be the last person applying for financial aid. It's like the lunch line. It's not so bad in the beginning, but whoever's at the end of the lunch line gets the worst food. You get what's left, and oftentimes, there's nothing left. So, and at some institutions, there'll always be money left, but most, that's not the case. So you want to be on top of the deadline. You never want to be last. It also says something about your character, frankly. If you're the person who's super organized, you're turning all your materials in, and I can see in my docket that, you know, nothing was late, you know, that says something about you. If I see that everything came in at the dead last second and I'm still missing this, I'm not as excited because, you know, you're not on top of things. And that's everything that you present in a holistic admissions process, we see. So do your research, stay on top of deadlines, and be very, very organized. Okay, I have 2 last pieces of advice. And this one is very, very important because one of the reasons I have worked at Wellesley College, and I know I share this with all the other institutions here, is that we have extraordinarily generous financial aid budgets. So now, with that said, I know a lot of parents, and fair enough, are sweating bullets about some of the sticker prices, right? You see $58,000 to go to, you know, a 4-year private institution, and you get panicky, and that's fair. That's a lot of money. But it is so rare at our institutions that someone's actually paying that. So I'm going to give you a little advice, and then if you come to my financial aid session later, we'll talk about it in more detail. But don't ever let the sticker price deter you from applying to a college. You know, always think beyond, because like I said, you know, at our institution, 60% of the students do not pay that sticker price. It's actually a very funny world when you think about admissions. Like, we're going to charge you this, but we're going to charge you nothing. But that's the beauty, is that people don't realize how generous. For a lot of the institutions here, for families who make $60,000 and less, you can often graduate completely debt-free. Debt-free. For many students at our institutions, when I ask them, you know, like, why did you choose to attend X? Why here? And they're like, you were so much cheaper than my in-state option. I couldn't say no, you know. Well, that, and we have amazing programs. But I do think, you know, and it's tough because you've been trained this whole time to ask questions about scholarships, you know, because I'll openly say this. Most of us actually don't offer scholarships. And then people get all, oh my gosh, there's no scholarships, so what am I gonna do? But we offer financial aid in a different way with same concept. You don't have to pay it back, but we don't call it scholarships, we call it grant. We don't give out, a lot of us don't give out merit aid. That's another one that sends people into panic. They're like, oh, if I don't get merit, then, because I'll be very honest, because someone actually pushed me on this the other day. I was like, when we only take the best of the best, everybody deserves merit. So, or someone asked me the other day if we had an honors college, and I was like, everybody here is in the honors college. But like I said, I have so many conversations with families that after they've enrolled in the fall that said, I was really nervous about this whole process, but I went through the whole financial aid process and I got really excited because not only can I afford you, but you are so much cheaper than I actually thought you were. So to be honest, and I'm sure some of you have heard about the net price calculator. Is everybody? That's one you should write down right now, net price calculator. It is mandated by the government that every single institution in the United States has to have one on their website. And the idea is you plug in your family's financial information, and it pops out this number. Now, I'm gonna tell you a little secret. Some net price calculators are very long, and that's because a lot of those places will give merit aid or things are based on other things. But what's nice is some of them are shorter, and it can give you an idea of how much your family would have to contribute. So your parents can start thinking like, oh, you fell in love with X institution, early action or early decision may be a really good option for you because yes, clearly we can afford it. I must say when we put our net price calculator up on the website, I automatically plugged in what my daughter would have to pay. It was cheaper than daycare. I was like, why can't she go now? Why? So it was extraordinarily generous. And I say it every day. I'm like, we're very generous, but I didn't realize how generous until I saw that number. So cheaper than daycare. All right. And then the last piece of advice I want to give you is don't stress out. Right? How many is already stressed out? Like all the information I just gave you, or you're overwhelmed, right? The rest of you are totally lying. Everyone's stressed out. It's gonna be okay because you're gonna do your research. You're gonna have a broad list of schools. You're gonna apply to in-state. You're gonna apply to great institutions outside. You're gonna apply to reach schools. You're gonna apply to possibles. You're gonna apply to safeties. You're gonna have a range, and you're gonna have amazing choices in the end. And the things that you're probably going to panic about in the grand scheme of things, frankly, you should probably panic about your math grades more. So it'll be okay. And I know it's hard. You got to take a deep breath every once in a while, and you're going to get frazzled. And everybody around you is going to start peppering you with questions. You probably already got them, right? Oh, where are you going to apply to? What are you going to major in? What do you want to be for the rest of your life? And and it's tough because what happens if you don't have an answer for some of those questions? You feel like a slacker, right? You're not a slacker. You're just weighing your options, and you're cool and collected. So don't stress out. It'll be okay. And if you repeat it enough times, it actually becomes true. So, all right. Now, I want to give some advice for parents. So I do actually a lot of parent panels at my own institution because this is also a really unique point in your time as well, right? For how many of you is this your first kid going off to college? Oh, wow. That's exciting. So pat yourself on the back. You got it. You made it this far. I'm sure like earlier on, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to age 4. but it gives me hope to see all of you in the audience. This is your daughter's journey. So you have to let your kids do this because they are about to become adults. And I know it's really hard because gosh knows I do everything for my kids right now. But you've got to let them own this process because they're the ones that are going to go to college and they're going to have to make these big decisions on campus without your help. And to be honest, what us admissions folks love to see is when the students are taking the initiative. Because again, it says something about your character. It says something to me if I get phone calls from you tons and tons of times requesting interviews and doing this and, oh, I just want to check in and make sure you have this, but I've never, ever heard from your daughter. That says something, because then I actually think, does she actually want to go here, or do you want her to go here? You know, and you want to make sure that she's going to be okay in this process. So I had a colleague of mine who struck a deal with her son when he was applying to college. And she said, because he was like, Mom, leave me alone. You're always bugging me and giving me advice. And she's like, all right, we're going to strike a deal. On Wednesdays, I can ask you whatever I want about the college process, but I'll leave you alone for the rest of the week. And he's like, that's fair. Okay. So you might want to actually have these conversations with, you know, I'm here to support you and help you. If it's too much, you know, have these conversations, because, you know, secretly, I think about my own college process when I was looking, and my mom was just like, I don't care where you go, just get out of my house. But my dad was like, I want to make sure you have, you know, some really amazing options, and he took me out on all sorts of college tours. And to be honest, the things that I remember now aren't, you know, frankly, I like vaguely remember what colleges we visited. I don't remember anything that was said in any information session or any of those pieces, but you know what I remember? I remember that road trip with my dad. And it's one of those things that I will carry with me for the rest of my life, because it was one of the last times, you know, where I think, you know, after you go to college, everything changes, and then, you know, you move out and all these things. But it was one of the last times it was just me and my dad driving all over Pennsylvania. We got lost a bunch of times. And I'm going to date myself. I got my dad totally into Pearl Jam. To this day, he still loves Pearl Jam. But it was one of those, you know, memories that I'm really glad that I had. And it's funny that it was the college process that brought us together in that way. But it was certainly something that, you know, for all the stress that goes on right now, like I said, it's going to be okay. But he was very supportive in a way that I needed. I didn't want him bugging me all the time, but he was very helpful. And filled out my financial aid forms on time. So you want to think about that piece. How can I help support, but not take over? Because like I said, this is their process, and you know, sometimes you gotta learn from your own mistakes. And it's tough, because even now, I know they're only 6 and 5. I suggest to them all the time where they should be going to college later on. My kids both know where everybody went. Although I recently visited Caltech, and I was like, maybe she can go there. It is hard not to project all of these things onto them, but it is fun to also to see, you know, hear their interests, and they're finally in a space where they can say, oh, you know, I can actually see myself doing this, or I can see myself here. So embrace that, you know, time, because it will, as you know, gosh knows time goes by quickly. All of these things will sneak up, and you know, next thing you know, you're packing the car up or jumping on an airplane, and it'll be okay. So, all right. So what did we learn today? Here's the quiz. Are you ready? You're gonna find the right fit. Very good. Do your research. Don't stress. Look at that. All right. See, now just repeat that over and over. And remember, like you know, folks said earlier, today is your chance to think bigger, to get all the skills and tools that you're going to need to walk into this process. Because the trick of highly selective admissions, you're going to learn very quickly, is, like I said, it's not about numbers. We're looking for students who are right for our institutions as well. So it's, how do I present myself? How do I, you know, how do I project all of these things that are important to me to an admissions committee in a way that they'll understand who I am? Because it is stressful, and you know, and you can't take this as a personal reflection, like, oh, if I don't get in here, then clearly, you know, I did something wrong. It's not that you did something wrong. It's not a personal reflection on whether you can have the ability to do the work, because frankly, of the students that apply, and you know, 80% of my applicant pool can absolutely do the academic work. I have no doubt in my mind. We just don't have enough spaces for everybody. So after that, we have to start thinking, knowing that you can do the work, are you a good fit for me? You know, have you thought about this? So I'm gonna leave it at that, and don't stress out, because I'm going to say that 50,000 times today. And I'm going to open it to questions, because we have I can take a few questions, and we're going to break into sessions, but I'm going to stop rambling. So, all right. Any questions at all? Yes?
You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
Since schools all have components on their websites, am I going to get the same expected family contribution when I go to, or do I have to go there every single month?
So that's a good question. So the question is, will you get the same estimated family contribution? So the one form that you have to fill out for every single institution in the United States is the FAFSA. So it spits out this number, and okay, I'm also going to openly put this out there. I'm an admissions officer, not a financial aid person, so this is very general info. It'll spit out this number that says your estimated family contribution, right? Now, every single college and university calculates. They'll take the information from the FAFSA and then do all sorts of things to it. So some of us, you'll hear later, require the CSS profile. That's through the College Board. Some don't require it at all. Some will just say, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that. Everybody's going to do it differently, and you will have to go on to each school's website to do their net price calculator, because when we all signed on to do it, we had to change the calculations in the background to reflect how we package students. So my net price calculator will just say, based on the information you gave me, in general, here's how we might package you at Wellesley. Everything's with a grain of salt, though, because taxes change and all sorts of things will change. But in general, this is the ballpark. So, yes.
Let me ask a question about the other end. When you've made the financial investment, your child has gone through 4 years of school. How do we as parents, like a business, find out and ask questions about the metrics of the kids coming out of the institution? What should we be asking happens to these grads and the investments that we're making in our children and they're making in their own lives?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So the question was, knowing all that you're about to invest, what are the assessments that you should be asking right now in the process?
Like a business would make before
Right.
they invest in new resources.
Right. Thousands of dollars are about to go into this investment. Well, it's sort of tricky because there are two metrics, I would say. There's certainly the ones that most, and it depends on what your definition of, I don't like using the word success because success is very subjective. You can certainly, when you go to visit colleges or go on college websites, you can certainly say, what percentage of graduates go on to graduate school? What percent of the senior class is employed directly after graduation? You can ask questions like that. I mean, the things that become much more difficult to assess are some of the pieces that I talked about earlier. How on earth do you assess someone how well adjusted they are or how strong their writing skills are? Some of those things are much softer and we don't really have statistics. I will say it's a very big topic in higher education right now because the government's talking about there are many places where if you are going to spend thousands of dollars, you want to know that it's worth the time and energy. I would actually say one of the ways that you can start thinking about that beyond the traditional stats of jobs and grad school is to meet with local alumni. So especially for the institutions that are represented here today, most of us have local alum clubs, and they can talk about their experiences that they had and also the networks that they made. Because you think about some of the institutions in this room, the networks alone at these universities are, I don't even know how you measure that. It's something that we talk about at Wellesley all the time, but I wouldn't know how to say, well, you have access to 2 of the 3 female secretaries of state, like Hillary takes interns every year and so does Madeline, so through some of your research, but I would say that alum clubs are actually a really good way. And you can actually write to universities and colleges across the US and say, hey, I'm interested, do you have any local alums in the area that I could talk to? So that's another way, so. Yes?
Hi, my question is, if 20% of the people you see are the ones that get in or whatever, like 80% is everybody can do the academics, what are some questions a student can ask to help themselves, to narrow it down? Is this a good fit for me? Am I a good fit for you? Like, what types of questions would you be asking as you're doing this research on the website with the alumni, with the bloggers? What are some good questions to help one narrow it down?
Sure. So I'm going to say a couple of things. One, you're going to find this answer a lot today. The answer for most questions to highly selective schools is, well, it depends. Some of the good questions, like I said, because it boils down to fit. Like any of the institutions here, we all have great networks. We all have really strong academic departments. Things that you can ask are, let's say you meet a current student, and you can ask something as simple as, what are your top 4 favorite things about here? And when they say, things like, oh, the community, and then they start discussing, well, this is the type of community that exists here. And then the student can think, oh, that actually is the kind of community that I find interesting. Or, describe to me the academic environment here. Is it intense? Is it competitive? Is it collaborative? You can ask, what do students do for fun on weekends? Because that actually wildly varies from institution to institution. Maybe you're the kind of student who you want to be in the heart of a city and you're going out all the time and going to museums and trying different things. Or maybe you're the kind of students, you love hiking and you want to be up in the mountains and you want to ski all the time. So it really boils down to personal fit. And rarely is it a case of, what's your average GPA, or, what are the top 5 majors here? Although sometimes, you think about another good one is, what do the majority of students do after graduation? Because some schools actually are very specific. It's like everybody loves going into political science and this is all they want to do. So maybe you think, gosh, if I'm this kind of person, maybe I don't want to go to that type of institution. So those are some of them. But like I said, sometimes it's not even asking questions, it's just soaking it in and just, talking to students and say, walk me through a typical day. Is this somewhere where you could see yourself really getting excited about? If that's your typical day, that's great. So, what else?
Given that today's graduate is going to have 8 different careers,
sure are.
what words of advice do you have for people who aren't quite sure of their major?
That's a good question. So if you're not sure, my biggest piece of the question was knowing that people are going to switch careers 8 times. What advice can you say? And like I said, it's just keep an open mind. And I actually say this in my office all the time. Say yes. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes opportunities come across your lap that you had no idea that existed. But the more you say yes, the more you get to try new things. So maybe you never thought you were going to apply for some internship in Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. But one of your roommates is applying for it, and you think, gosh, well, if she can do it, so can I. So say yes. Take a class your first year in a field you've never, ever heard of. Because I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure this is the case at most institutions represented here, one of my favorite stories is a student who came in. She was going to be an econ major. She was very, I'm very business focused. My parents are business owners. This is what I want to do. And she took a computer science class. And she totally was blown away by the professor. And the woman was very engaging. It was a small class. She got really excited about it. And the professor said to her at the end, she's like, you're really good at this. Why don't you take one more class? And she's like, well, I'd never thought about computer science as a field, but what's one more class? She is now a 3rd-year PhD candidate in computer science at an institution in Boston. And she talked extensively about how, every time the professor would say to her, try this, take one more class. Why don't you just do some research in my lab? And she's like, I never thought about research opportunities. But amazing, when she was a senior, she was published and presented her work at a national conference, which then landed her a number of PhD opportunities. And like I said, in a field she never thought she would be in. Because that's the biggest difficulty I see with students today when they're just so focused on one field. You think, gosh, there's so many amazing things. And especially for women, like I said, we're so underrepresented in so many areas. And it can be easy to think, oh, it's too hard, or I don't want to try this. Keep an open mind. So, what else? In the corner.
What's the percentage of Midwesterners at Wellesley? And is it a percentage that
Sure. So the question is, what's the percentage of Midwesterners at Wellesley? Are we looking for a certain number? And I'm going to broaden this to the pools at all of our institutions, frankly. The percentage of Midwesterners at our institution, I mean, maybe 5%, 6%. And it also depends on your definition of the Midwest. We like to throw in more states. You know, so we do want to see more Midwesterners because we know what makes the educational experience at all of these institutions rich and amazing is the diversity that you all bring to the table. You think your experience is like everyone else's around you, but then all of a sudden you're sitting next to a kid from inner city Brooklyn who thinks everything you just said is like so wildly new and exciting. You know, and we understand that diversity comes in so many forms that it's not just ethnic and racial. You know, we're looking for diversity, geographic. Anybody from Montana? Montana. You know, we're looking for diversity of thought. We're looking for, you know, religious diversity. All of these things are really important because it makes the classroom environment richer. So all of us have recruitment plans with thousands of dollars being poured into them to get you all excited. Because, you know, the fact that we flew out here, you know, taking a couple days off from work and spending all this money to hang out with you guys on a Saturday shows the commitment level that our institutions have to getting students like you to consider places like us. So, and it's not that we're gunning for a certain number, but we know that we're a happier place if we can just get more. So, yes. Ooh, that's the million-dollar question. So what else is there beyond academics and extracurricular? You know, it's a really tough question because we look at so many different things. So we look at, so the Common App will ask you all sorts of demographic questions, right? And sometimes you think, gosh, are they just doing this to see if I can last to the end of the application? You know, it's so long. It's like a race. But we ask these questions because we know each of those pieces tells us a little bit more about your story. Because like I said, what we're really looking for is how can we create you know, not only the academically most talented class, but also the most interesting class. Because like I said, you know, 20 years from now when you graduate from a place like Johns Hopkins or Duke or Harvard or wherever, you're not gonna remember what you learned in the classroom. You're gonna remember, you know, the different people in your hallway who came from all these different countries and speak different languages, and, you know, and you thought everybody thought the same way, and then all of a sudden you're presented with like 17 different viewpoints. You now have to learn how to not only defend your own, but be open to others, which frankly is the way of the world. So we look at everything from your parents' family background and their education levels to, you know, how many siblings you have, whether you babysat over the summer. All of these things tell a little bit of your story, and that's the whole idea behind holistic admissions. So, because like I said, it's not just, are you a, you know, leader of 14 clubs? We want to know that also that you're going to come to our community and be fully engaged. So, all right, I think we have time for one more question. I thought I saw a hand. Yes.
Hi, my name's Amber Hurd. I'm from Fairfield, Ohio. I go to Fairfield Senior High School, and I was just wondering, when would be the best time to take the SAT subject test, and is it better to focus on the ACT or SAT, or just take both?
Ooh, that's a very good question. So, best time for the SAT 2 subject tests, and then whether do you take the SAT or the ACTs. The first one, best time to take the SAT 2 subject test, right after you take the class that the subject's in. Do not wait if you're taking one in chemistry 2 years later when you've forgotten everything. So realistically, that's something that you can do now. If you're about to finish a class, you know, you're taking AP US History right now, you might as well just sign up for that US History one. So take it as soon as you can, so it's fresh in your mind and it's off your plate. It's one last exam you gotta take later. Now, the ACT, SAT is very interesting because here in the Midwest, you guys are big fans of the ACT. The coasts almost predominantly take the SAT. Most institutions, especially ones here, they'll take either, and we don't have a preference actually for either. My running joke, take them both and send in the scores that are highest. Because like I said, it's less about we like this test versus that test. Some institutions actually don't require either of them, so do your research. But if anybody offers the option to send in either, they actually don't prefer one over the other. So, all right, so I want to make sure we have a little time to stretch and move around before the next break. So hopefully this was really helpful and gets you excited for the day, asking good questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Maggie.